This man got the fright of his life when he took this selfie in the forest. He thought this was going to be a nice and quiet day. They were walking for hours without seeing anybody, and that was just the way David liked. There was even enough time for a cute selfie with his dog. But then he saw the background of the picture. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. David had always loved taking his dog, Cooper, on long hikes through the forest. It was a great way for them to bond and enjoy some fresh air and exercise. On this particular day, they had ventured further into the woods than usual, exploring a trail they had never taken before. It was peaceful, with only the sounds of leaves rustling in the wind to break the silence. As they walked along the trail, he snapped a few pictures of his faithful companion trotting beside him. As he looked at the screen, he couldn't help but notice something strange in the background of the photo. It was a dark figure, barely visible through the trees, but it was definitely there. David knew that he had to investigate. He stood up and motioned for Cooper to follow him. They started walking and began to make their way toward the spot where the figure had been lurking. As they got closer to the area where the figure had been, David noticed that the ground seemed to be disturbed. It looked like something heavy had been dragged through the underbrush. Cooper continued to bound through the woods, his tail wagging excitedly as he sniffed out new smells and explored his surroundings. Finally, they arrived at the spot where David had seen the figure in the background of his selfie. As they entered the clearing, the man's heart skipped a beat as he saw what lay before him, and then Cooper barked one time and bolted off into the thick vegetation of the forest. "Where are you going?" David screamed as he struggled to keep up with his canine. David's heart raced as he chased after Cooper. "What is it, buddy?" David yelled after seeing Cooper come to a halt in the distance. Cooper stood still, his body tense and his fur bristling. David could see that he was looking at something, but he couldn't quite make out what it was. As he approached, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. It was then that David finally saw the creature. His blood ran cold. It was a large creature. It was covered in fur and had large claws, but the dog was already charging towards the creature, his teeth bared and his body brimming with energy. David knew that he had to act fast. He started to run towards Cooper, hoping to pull him away from danger. As he drew closer, David could see that the creature was a bear. Slowly, David started walking backward, all the while whispering to Cooper in the hope that he would follow. But Cooper did not listen. And in the end, it was a good thing that he didn't, because David had not seen yet the trouble that this bear was in. Luckily for David, and even more so for this bear, Cooper knew better. He slowly crept towards the bear, who was now leaning up against a tree. David couldn't believe what he was seeing. Cooper, his beloved dog, was sitting right next to a wild bear, howling softly. It was as if they were communicating with each other. David's fear slowly dissipated as he watched the interaction between the two animals. He realized that Cooper was not in any danger and that the bear was not aggressive. David decided to cautiously approach the two animals, hoping not to disturb their peaceful encounter. As he got closer, he could see that the bear was injured, but one of its legs was clearly hurt, and it looked like it had been dragging itself through the woods for some time. David's heart went out to the animal, and he knew that he had to help. David reached into his backpack and pulled out a first aid kit that he always carried with him on hikes. He slowly approached the bear, holding out his hand as a gesture of peace. To his surprise, the bear didn't react aggressively. David thought that the bear had been in a fight with another animal, and its leg had been hurt in the process. But he later would find out that the truth was completely different. David carefully assessed the situation. He realized that he had the proper supplies with him to help the bear a little bit, but he also knew that the animal would need some better medical help than he could give him. He bound up the paw of the injured animal after disinfecting it with some fluids from his medical kit. He was about to call the local animal rescue division when something miraculous happened. The large bear got up from the ground and started walking on all fours. David knew that he couldn't let the animal go on its own, not with an injury like that. He had to follow her and make sure that she got the help she needed. Without hesitation, David motioned for Cooper to follow him, and they started to trail the bear. As they followed her deeper into the woods, David couldn't help but wonder what had happened to her. Finally, they arrived at a clearing, and in the distance David could see a small cabin. He knew that they were getting close to civilization. As they approached the cabin, David could see that it was abandoned. The windows were broken, and the door was hanging off its hinges. David cautiously entered the cabin, his senses on high alert. He didn't know what to expect, but as he walked through the door, he was greeted with a surprising sight. The cabin was not completely abandoned. There was grass that had been gathered on the floor, and many twigs and branches formed a large nest. "Are you living here?" David asked the wounded bear that had now taken a seat on the wooden floor. "Why have you taken us here?" he asked. David didn't have to wait long to get an answer to that question, because seconds later he heard a faint whining coming from the other room. He looked at the bear, and he believed he saw the desperation in her eyes. As David opened the door that led over to the other room, he immediately saw why he was brought there. There was a huge hole in the wooden floor, and beneath that, a steep 15-foot drop into the basement of the cabin. And when David looked into this hole, he saw 3 baby bear cubs howling toward him from the cold basement floor. They must have lived here in this cabin and fell through the old floor. That's how this mother bear's got her injury. Her size must have made it possible for her to climb out and get help. That's why she wanted us to follow her. "So we are going to help," he yelled as he picked up his phone and tried to call animal rescue once again. After several attempts, David finally got through to the local animal rescue division. He explained the situation and the urgency of the matter. They promised to send a team immediately, but in the meantime, David had to keep the cubs warm and safe. He knew that time was running out, and he had to act fast. David used some of the materials from his backpack to create a makeshift rope ladder that he could use to get down into the basement. He carefully climbed down and was immediately greeted by the sight of the 3 cubs. They were cold and scared, but David now felt confident enough to approach them. He wrapped each of the cubs in a warm blanket and carefully climbed back up the ladder. Once he was back in the cabin, he placed the cubs next to their mother, who immediately began to lick them and keep them warm. A few hours later, the animal rescue team arrived. They carefully transported the mother bear and her cubs to a nearby wildlife center where they could receive proper medical care. As they drove away, David felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had helped save the life of a wild animal, and he had done it with the help of his faithful companion Cooper. It was a moment that he would never ever forget, and he knew that it was one that Cooper would always remember as well. As they walked back through the woods, David and Cooper felt a sense of accomplishment. They had gone on a hike and had come back with a newfound appreciation for the world around them. And now they would continue to explore the great outdoors together, always on the lookout for new adventures.